Have you ever awakened in the soft gray light of dawn and felt a strange, nagging whisper echoing through your mind, asking whether the life you're living is truly your own or merely a carefully rehearsed performance dictated by expectations, fears, and a familiarity that has dulled the edges of your being? Somewhere between the alarm clock's shrill insistence and the first sip of coffee, there lies a question so potent that it can flicker into consciousness as a sudden jolt, or linger as a dull ache beneath the surface of daily routine. Are you genuinely alive, or have you settled into a safe, predictable existence that offers comfort at the cost of your own untapped potential? We drift through our days guided by invisible scripts, cultural norms, parental hopes, social validations, each line memorized so thoroughly that we barely notice when the stage around us shifts, when the applause fades, or when the lights grow dim, leaving us blinking alone in the wings of a life that, deep down, we never auditioned for. And yet, buried beneath the layers of habit and obligation, there is a spark, an ember of possibility that refuses to be extinguished. A secret promise that whispers of transformation and meaning if only we will dare to listen. Carl Gustav Jung, that enigmatic Swiss psychiatrist who roamed the frontier between science, mythology, and the soul's deepest mysteries, called this journey toward reclaiming our own story individuation, and he insisted it was the truest calling of every human life. Yet his writings, dense with arcane symbols and alchemical metaphors, often feel like an esoteric labyrinth, promising revelation while veiling the simplest key behind walls of theory and abstraction. How, then, do we penetrate that fortress of ideas and unearth the practical insight that can shatter the chains of unconscious routine? How do we move from feeling like passive spectators, waiting for something, someone, or somehow to rescue us, to becoming the bold authors of our own destiny? Imagine for a moment that the life you've constructed, brick by virtual brick, is built on a foundation of quicksand. Every achievement you chase, every accolade you collect, every carefully curated image of success you project might look solid from the outside, but each one conceals a shadowy undercurrent dragging you further from the authentic self you long to meet. In this realization lies both the terror and the exhilaration of genuine transformation, the terror of recognizing you've been living according to a borrowed blueprint, and the exhilaration of sensing that beneath the crumbling facade lies uncharted terrain awaiting your footprints. What if that restlessness gnawing at your core, that anxiety disguised as fatigue or distraction, is not a flaw to be medicated or a quirk to be ignored, but a call to awaken, to shatter the mirror of unfulfilled potential and peer into a reflection you scarcely recognize, trembling with the promise of something more? There is an urgency here that transcends self-help jargon. It is the urgency of time passing inexorably, of sunsets you watch but do not remember, of mornings when you rise only to repeat again a script that, in truth, never felt like yours. Have you noticed how easy it is to lull yourself into believing that life is meant to be comfortable above all else? How quietly we yield to small compromises, sacrificing dreams on the altar of convenience, trading curiosity for errands, letting inspiration slip through our fingers like water. Jung warned that if we fail to heed the call of individuation, we risk being swept along by a current so powerful that we wake at the end of our days only to realize, with a hollow pang, that we never truly swam. In the coming journey, we will confront a series of questions so fundamental that they will shake the scaffolding of everything you once took for granted. What if the roles you've been playing, dutiful child, diligent employee, tireless caregiver, or polished performer, are but masks obscuring the vast panorama of your hidden self? What if the failures and regrets you've stashed away in the attic of your memory are not stains on your record but signposts pointing back to the passions, the longings, and the dreams you abandoned when the world told you they were impractical or impossible? And what if, behind Jung's elaborate symbology and ancient myths, lies a surprisingly simple, actionable secret that can ignite the first vital spark of rebellion against the life-draining inertia of routine. This secret is not a flashy shortcut or a magical incantation that instantaneously transforms your reality. It is, instead, a radical shift in consciousness, an invitation to wake up to the uncanny fact that every moment offers a choice between surrendering to the habitual and stepping into the unknown, between playing it safe and embracing the full complexity of your inner world. It requires courage, yes, but more than that, it demands honesty, an uncompromising willingness to look at yourself with clear eyes, to name your own shadows, and to reclaim the narrative authority you may have unconsciously surrendered to others. As we stand at the threshold of this exploration, sense the restlessness coiling in your belly, an intimate signal that you are ready for a more expansive way of living. Feel the tug of possibility as it whispers through the cracks in your habitual thinking. What if today, right now, you decided to claim the pen of authorship and begin rewriting your story? That's the first glimmer of inner rebellion Jung spoke of, the stirrings of a future self you have long postponed meeting, afraid that the cost of knowledge might be the dismantling of the comfortable illusions you've built around you. But what if the true cost of staying asleep is far greater, the slow erosion of vitality, the quiet suffocation of your own aliveness, the regret that blooms too late into a flower of sorrow? This moment, in all its restless intensity, is the hinge upon which possibility swings. It is the point where you can either turn away, burying your unease in the routines of tomorrow, or lean into it, allowing the tension to become the spark that ignites your journey. What if, in the next breath, you chose to lean in? To step through the door your inner self has nudged ajar and meet the catalysts of transformation face to face. To feel the thrill of confronting your unacknowledged desires, your disowned traits, and the silent chorus of voices that have shaped your decisions without your consent? We will traverse 6 stages on this path of awakening. First, the mirror of unfulfilled potential that reflects the yawning gap between who you are told to be and who you ache to become. Second, the dance with the shadow, where you'll learn to embrace the parts of yourself you've branded shameful or unacceptable. Third, the alchemy of inner dialogue, discovering how to convene a council within your psyche where ego and self can negotiate a unified vision. Fourth, the rite of passage into authenticity, crafting symbolic acts that breathe soul into the smallest moments. Fifth, the bridge to collective meaning, connecting your personal awakening to a purpose greater than yourself. And finally, the secret of conscious self-creation, the deceptively simple daily decision that transforms you from a passive character into the co-author of your own life. Between each of these stages lies a narrative twist, a moment when the pain of clinging to old patterns collides with the exhilaration of stepping into deeper truth. And behind them all lies an existential question as sharp as a blade. Will you continue to drift through your days as a spectator, watching life's riches unfold at a distance, or will you dare to claim the messy, unpredictable, breathtakingly real experience of living from the fullness of your own being? This is not about transient motivation or a fleeting burst of inspiration. It's about learning to recognize the subtle saboteurs that whisper, "Not today, maybe later," and replacing them with an inner declaration that begins, "Today is the day I begin to live." It's about choosing, in each moment, to question the stories you inherited and to author new ones that feel unmistakably yours, stories rich with the texture of your unique voice, your particular wounds, your singular gifts. It's about discovering that the single most important act you can undertake is to enter into a committed relationship with yourself, to honor the depth and complexity of your inner world, and to trust that it knows the way toward fulfillment. So pause now, and notice the rise and fall of your breath, the gentle reminder that you are alive in this exact instant. Sense the weight of your body in the chair or the floor beneath you, the subtle tension in your shoulders, the freight of expectations you carry. Hold the question lightly before you. What if the life you yearn for, the life you sense shimmering just beyond the horizon of habit, is not a distant fantasy but a reality awaiting your courageous invitation. As the day unfolds, let this be the ember you carry, a quiet insistence that each choice, each thought, each moment of awareness is an act of creation. And keep close the promise that ahead, hidden within Jung's dense but generous legacy, is a simple, profound key that will unlock the door to conscious self-creation, breathing life into every corner of your existence. What awaits is not a polished formula or a tidy roadmap, but a living process that will challenge you, surprise you, and ultimately guide you toward the authentic center of your own story. So here we stand, at the edge of the known, the familiar comfort slipping behind us like a well-worn coat we no longer need. Ahead lies uncharted territory, the landscape of your true self, shimmering with possibility and, yes, fraught with uncertainty. But if ever there was a moment to leap, to trust the stirrings of your soul, to claim the pen and begin writing the chapters you were destined to live, it is this very moment. What if today you dared to say, no more spectators seek, I step onto the stage of my own becoming? What if today, at this breath, you claimed your own story? The adventure begins now. Querito espectador. Confira se você ainda está inscrito no canal. Às vezes, a inscrição pode ser cancelada automaticamente, então é sempre bom verificar. Aproveite e se torna membro do canal. Como membro, você terá benefícios incríveis, como assistir aos nossos conteúdos semanais. Além disso, você pode apoiar nosso trabalho sendo financiador do canal com value. Isso ajuda-nos permite investir em ferramentas melhores e elevar a qualidade de produção dos nossos conteúdos. Junte-se a nós nessa jornada e faça parte de nossa comunidade. E compartilhe gente ai nos comentários de que cidade você está escutando esta história e que horas são por aí agora. Part 1. The mirror of unfulfilled potential. Have you ever stood before a mirror first thing in the morning, only to catch a glimpse of someone you barely recognize, eyes shadowed by obligation, shoulders hunched under the weight of responsibility, a flicker of something once bright dulled by a lifetime of shoulds? That reflection is the curtain rising on your own untold story, the silent witness to a life being performed rather than lived. It's in that instant, when you hesitate and the image in the glass hesitates back, that the real work begins. You sense a chasm stretching between the person you've become and the person you once dreamed of being. That yawning gap, invisible to casual passers-by, throbs with regret, longing, and the painful conviction that something essential has been left behind. We're all handed masks, roles that promise safety and approval in exchange for our genuine voice. From childhood, we learn to play parts that satisfy parental hopes, social customs, professional expectations. We become the dutiful student, the reliable colleague, the devoted partner, all of it scripted, rehearsed, familiar. And yet, beneath the applause of polite compliments and pats on the back, there lies an ache, the ache of a voice unheard, a gift unused, a desire unpursued. It's as if we've been tuned to someone else's station and forgotten the frequency of our own signal. The result? A creeping sense that time is slipping through our fingers like water, carrying away the raw material of our authentic selves. Carl Jung called attention to this need for self-confrontation decades ago. He insisted we needed to hold up a mirror to our unfulfilled potential, to face the shadow of expectation that sabotages our deepest yearnings. This shadow is no mere flaw, it is the collective weight of every demand placed upon you, some reasonable, many arbitrary, all capable of drowning out your own spark. The moment you recognize that you're living by a blueprint drawn on someone else's blueprint, the first crack appears in the facade. You realize that your life has been on autopilot, steered by forces you never consciously selected. That realization is brutal. You feel ashamed, as though you've betrayed your truest self. You wonder how you ended up here, locked into routines that strangle rather than sustain you. But shame, Jung taught, can be transformed into fuel for the journey that follows. Rather than burying those uncomfortable feelings under busywork, what if you invited them in for a conversation? What if you honored the sting of regret as a powerful signpost, pointing you back toward the path you abandoned long ago? In that moment, the mirror shifts from being an instrument of self-criticism into a lantern illuminating your hidden doorway. Here's the diagnosis. Most of us operate according to a psychic mechanism known as projection. We project the voice of authority, parents, institutions, peers, onto our sense of self. These projections become internalized scripts telling us who we should be, where we should go, how we should feel. The truly terrifying thing is that we seldom realize the script isn't ours. We follow it so faithfully we mistake it for our own conviction. And while compliance may earn us praise, it slowly erodes the soil from which our unique gifts might sprout. Over time, that soil becomes compacted with guilt and doubt, leaving us scrambling for identity in ever shallower ground. Have you noticed how easy it is to equate stability with success? We chase promotions, accumulate credentials, sustain relationships that have long since lost their spark. We fill our schedules to the brim to avoid the silence where unspoken dreams could speak. It's as if we're terrified that if we pause and look inward, we'll discover we've been living on a foundation of quicksand. But that pause is precisely what we need. In fact, it's a radical act of self-preservation and self-respect. What if the very comfort you cling to is the thing killing your potential? So how do we begin to shatter the mirror that reflects only obligation? The solution isn't more hustle or a flash of motivational adrenaline. It's a simple, consistent practice of reflection. Start by carving out a few minutes each morning. No phone, no email, no to-do list. Stand, or sit, with your reflection, and ask, what do I really want? Don't let the first answer slip past. Keep going. Peel back layer after layer. The initial responses will be familiar: more money, more security, more approval. Those are the projections talking. Keep digging until you find the raw kernel beneath, perhaps the desire to create art, to build community, to feel truly seen and understood. Imagine that kernel as a seed buried beneath old newspapers and cement. When you water it, by admitting it aloud, writing it down, honoring it in small choices, it begins to push through the barriers. Suddenly, mundane tasks carry new meaning. The morning coffee becomes a ritual of intention. The commute becomes a space for inner dialogue. The lunch break becomes a moment to remind yourself of your deeper aim. The mirror no longer just shows the cracks. It begins to reveal a blueprint for growth. You recognize patterns, times when you felt alive, moments when passion ignited your blood, sparks that you smothered for the sake of responsibility. Let's ground this in a concrete example. Picture Sarah, a school teacher who lost herself in lesson plans and parent conferences. She believed her worth was tied to her students' test scores. One day, she lingers by the staff bathroom mirror, staring at her weary reflection. She asks, "Is this all?" The answer comes as a whisper, "You used to paint." That memory had been pushed so deep she almost doubted it existed. But at that moment, she scribbles the word paint on a sticky note and places it on her bathroom mirror. Every day, she adds another note, sketch, color, canvas, until the mirror is a mosaic of reminders. Within weeks, She reels off excuses no longer and spends 30 minutes each morning at an easel in her garage. Her reflection begins to shine with recognition. That's the alchemy of simple acknowledgement. It carries emotional tension, fear of judgment, guilt over wasting time, terror of disappointing those who rely on us. But it's precisely that tension that keeps us honest. It alerts us when we're slipping back into autopilot. It reminds us that the stakes are nothing less than our own vitality. And yes, you will tremble at first. You'll worry you're chasing a fantasy. But the alternative, the slow dimming of your inner light, is far more devastating. Pause now and recall a childhood dream you shelved when the world said it was impractical. Maybe you dreamed of writing stories, of playing an instrument, of traveling to places whose names felt like incantations. That dream didn't vanish, it was simply passed down to the attic of your memory, gathering dust. What if retrieving that dream is the first step toward waking up? What if the very act of naming it aloud cracks open the door to your authentic self? Before we move forward, take a breath and honor that buried desire. Whisper it to yourself, write it across the page, or speak it into the silence of your car. Feel the thrill and the fear coiled in your belly. You're standing at the threshold of something profound, a return to the wellspring of your own aliveness. And while this first step may seem small, it carries infinite consequence. Every moment spent in honest reflection chips away at the mask you've been wearing, revealing more of your true face beneath. As you begin to clear the mirror of its fog, notice how other projections fall away. You'll start to sense patterns, repetitions of behavior that no longer serve you, and you'll feel the urgent invitation to break free. The simple act of facing your reflection becomes a ritual of courage. It tells your psyche you're ready to reclaim authority over your own narrative. And trust me, this exercise will stir up more than nostalgia. It will summon both doubt and determination in equal measure. The next stage of this journey, the dance with your shadow, is where the real magic begins. Having unearthed that seed of desire, you'll come face to face with the darker parts of yourself that resist change. Those hidden aspects, once acknowledged, will become the very engine driving your transformation. But before that, take a moment to honor the bravery it required to confront your mirror, to speak your dream into existence. Feel the momentum building beneath your feet, the air shifting around you. Remember, acknowledging your unfulfilled potential is not a luxury reserved for a weekend retreat. It's an everyday revolution, a commitment to refuse comfort when it costs your soul. Keep returning to your mirror. Keep naming what you want beyond the safety of expectation. And brace yourself, because in the next chapter you'll be invited to dance with the parts of yourself you've long denied, those shadow elements that, when embraced, will catalyze the authenticity you crave. The secret thread Jung wove through all his work begins here, at the edge of recognition. Are you ready to step through? Now that you've cracked open the mirror of unfulfilled potential, you stand at the threshold of a deeper journey, one that beckons you into a dance with the parts of yourself you've long kept hidden. This is no graceful waltz but a raw, unfiltered tango, where every misstep risks confrontation with the darker impulses you've dismissed as shameful or dangerous. Yet within that tangled choreography lies the fertile ground for genuine authenticity. To ignore your shadow is to turn your back on half your own being, condemning energy that could fuel your creativity and purpose to wither in the dark. In Jungian terms, the shadow is the repository of all those traits and impulses you disavow: anger, envy, greed, pride, even forbidden longings and irrational fears. Society teaches us to classify these elements as unacceptable. Our families and schools reward the bright, orderly self and punish whatever seems wild or unruly. Over time, you tuck those aspects away, tucking them so deeply that the boundary between you and your shadow blurs. And yet the shadow never vanishes, it simply lurks behind the facade, pulling invisible strings and shaping your life in ways you rarely suspect. Have you ever wondered why certain criticisms sting so fiercely, or why you find yourself drawn into repeating destructive patterns despite your best intentions? Often, it's your shadow projecting its energy onto the world around you. You despise arrogance in a colleague, for instance, only to discover in a sudden flash of anger that what you loathe so intensely resides, unacknowledged, within your own psyche. That projection becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see the flaw in others, rail against it, then reproduce it under stress, convinced you're fighting an external enemy when the real battleground lies within. The cost of ignoring your shadow is steep. It drains your vitality, fragments your attention, and leads to impulsive eruptions of behavior you later regret. Every time you suppress a part of yourself, it grows more volatile, demanding release until you finally crack under pressure, snap at a loved one, sabotage an opportunity, or collapse into self-hatred. It's like shoving a wild animal into a cage. Eventually, the bars will give way, and the unleashed force will wreak havoc both inside and outside of you. Here's the existential dilemma. Will you continue to hide from these disowned aspects, or will you muster the courage to face them head-on? The impulse to flee is strong. Shame, fear, and the risk of social rejection all conspire to keep you locked in denial. Yet nothing kills potential faster than living in fragments. We were born to be integrated beings, each impulse and emotion contributing to the mosaic of our uniqueness. Only by befriending your shadow can you reclaim the full spectrum of your aliveness. Now for a twist you might not expect. What you've labeled as flaws are often undigested energies that, when consciously integrated, become extraordinary sources of creativity, resilience, and empathy. The anger you once feared could fuel fierce advocacy for justice. The competitiveness you scorn might drive you to master a craft. The shame you dread might deepen your capacity for compassion. The very traits you've buried can be transmuted into gifts if you stop treating them as enemies and begin to invite them into the light. Consider the story of Elena, a marketing executive who believed her ambition was a liability, something that made her too intense and unlikable. She spent years tamping down her drive, adopting a watered-down persona to fit into the corporate mold. But resentment simmered beneath the surface, erupting in passive-aggressive email blasts and sleepless nights. Only when she allowed herself to feel that hunger for recognition, scribbling out her desires in a private journal and exploring what ambition felt like in her body, did she discover a balanced version of herself, a leader who could pursue big goals without sacrificing her integrity or warmth. That discovery came through a simple yet powerful exercise. Elena invited her shadow self to dialogue. Each evening, she sat quietly with a candle, placing a blank notebook on her lap. She would ask, "What do you need?" Ambition, and then write down whatever arose, angry demands, tender hopes, wounded fears. No judgment, no censorship. Over weeks, the impulsive, dictatorial aspects of her ambition softened into a clear drive paired with compassion, while the timid part of her personality gained a voice and newfound confidence. Integration emerged from that honest conversation. The psychological mechanism at play here is not mystical, it's the principle of psychic economy. By acknowledging your shadow's hunger for energy, you redirect its force from unconscious outbursts into deliberate, creative channels. Instead of allowing repressed anger to poison your relationships, you transform it into invigorating assertiveness. Instead of letting envy corrode your self-esteem, you convert it into inspiration to grow. But you have to make space for those energies to speak and be heard. So here's a challenge I want you to try right now. Name one trait you've demonized in yourself. Maybe it's impatience, controlling tendencies, a habit of self-pity, or a longing for recognition you suspect is shallow. Whisper it aloud, write it on a piece of paper, or say it to the empty room. Feel the resistance that arises, notice the tightening in your chest, the voice that tells you, I'm better than that. That voice itself is part of the shadow dance. Honor the tension as a signal, you are on the brink of integration. Once you've named that trait, invite it to the table of your consciousness. Ask it, what do you want from me? What are you protecting me from? Then listen. You might feel a surge of adrenaline, a burst of anger, or a trembling ache in your chest. That's the shadow speaking. Write down its answers without filtering. You're not just venting, you're gathering vital information about unmet needs and hidden motivations. This practice may stir up old wounds. Shame might flood in, memories of moments when you felt cast out for being too much or not enough. Stay present. Let the shame flow through you, witnessing it as you would a child's tears. And then ask, what wisdom are you carrying? Often, shame signals an invitation to compassion, compassion for yourself and compassion for others who carry similar burdens. By offering kindness to your wounded parts, you begin to dissolve the false boundaries separating good and bad. Jung taught that only through this courageous integration can you approach the self, the archetype of wholeness that resides at the center of your psyche. The shadow is not the enemy, it's the gateway. Every time you suppress a piece of yourself, you push that golden thread of wholeness just out of reach. But when you weave your darker aspects into the tapestry, the whole fabric glows with new richness. Let's ground this in another real-life example. Imagine James, a quiet accountant who hid his deep yearning for performance and spotlight behind spreadsheets. He labeled that desire as vain and kept it mummified for decades. But the repressed urge seeped out in nervous jokes, awkward attempts at humor, and a crushing sense of inauthenticity. When James finally admitted his love for theater, starting with a weekend improv class, he discovered not only untapped talent but also a profound sense of liberation. His professional competence remained, but now it was infused with the bravery and creativity he denied himself. That's the alchemy of shadow integration. What was once constricting becomes expansive. You stop policing yourself so harshly. You stop hiding behind safe facades and start showing up with the full palette of your humanity. Others respond to that authenticity with deeper connection. You access creative solutions because you're no longer draining psychic energy on self-repression. You become magnetic in your vulnerability. Of course, this is not a one-time fix. Your shadow will shift and morph as you grow. New aspects will surface whenever you stretch beyond your comfort zone. The key is to cultivate an ongoing dialogue, a kind of inner board meeting where every part has a voice and every complaint is taken seriously. You don't have to like everything you hear, but you do have to listen. With practice, the initial fear gives way to curiosity. What's behind that outburst? What treasure lies beneath my shame? As you move through this shadow dance, remember that integration doesn't mean perfection. It means wholeness. You don't eliminate dark impulses, you inhabit them with conscious awareness. You become both the dancer and the dance, aware of each step, each turn, each stumble, and each leap. You cultivate compassion for your complexity rather than cutting away the edges that once felt jagged. So take a moment now to revisit the trait you named earlier. Feel into the story you've been telling yourself about it. Then ask, what if this very trait is the key to my growth? Sit with that question. Let it echo in the silence. You might hear a whisper, "Use me wisely," or "I protect you from being stepped on," or "I long to be seen." Those messages are gifts. They're the raw material from which your authenticity will be sculpted. Before we step into the next phase of this journey, the alchemy of inner dialogue, notice the shift in your energy. Do you feel a subtle lightening, a loosening of old knots? Perhaps a flicker of excitement or even a tremor of fear. Both are signs you're on the right path. The dance with your shadow is neither comfortable nor entirely predictable, but it's essential. It readies you for the next stage, where you'll learn to convene an internal council, where ego and self, light and dark, ambition and compassion, all have seats at the table. In that council, something remarkable happens. Conflict dissolves into coherence, and you discover a unified vision that guides your life. But before that grand experiment, you must first acknowledge and invite your shadow onto the floor. Only then can you witness the harmony that emerges when every part of you is given voice. Are you prepared to carry the energy of this integration into your next inner gathering? The seeds of your next breakthrough lie waiting in the dialogue you're about to initiate. As the echoes of your shadow integration still hum beneath the surface, you find yourself at the threshold of a new terrain. One mapped not by outward achievements or conspicuous change, but by the subtle choreography of inner voices. You've stared into the mirror and beckoned the shadow to join your journey. Now the question becomes, will you remain captive to reactive impulses, or will you learn to convene an inner council that listens as much as it speaks? Carl Jung described this council as the dialogue between ego and self, a dynamic interplay where raw desire and deep wisdom forge a unified path. It's a concept that can sound lofty, even mystical, but its practice is as straightforward as putting pen to paper, or as intimate as reclining in silence and letting your mind utter its truths. What if the key to coherence in your everyday life lay not in external fixes but in mastering the art of internal conversation? What if, by turning your attention inward and granting each part of you a respectful seat at the table, you could dissolve the friction that has kept you stalled, confused, or perpetually at odds with yourself? Picture your mind as an old theater, its stage cluttered with actors vying for the spotlight. There's the ego, the dutiful manager whose job is to keep you safe, earn approval, and maintain a respectable image. There's the impulsive inner child, craving novelty, mischief, unconstrained expression. There's the critic, ever ready to tear down any attempt at genuine self-expression with barbs of not enough or too irresponsible. There's the caretaker, racked by guilt whenever you divert time or energy away from obligations to loved ones. All of these parts clamor for attention, and when they're left in an unsupervised hall, they shout over each other, leaving you mentally exhausted and spiritually paralyzed. Yet hidden backstage, behind the curtains of everyday awareness, lies another presence, the self, an archetypal seat of wisdom, compassion, and integrative vision. Rarely do we acknowledge this quieter authority, and so the internal theater remains beset by chaos. The pang of frustration you felt most recently, the sudden impulse to quit your job at the height of a stressful week, or the moment you flew into rage over a minor slight, those were not isolated incidents of weakness or overreaction. They were signals flashing. Your internal counsel was in disarray. The impulsive child grabbed the megaphone, drowning out the calmer voice of reflective insight. Or the critical parent rained down curses so fierce you recoiled from trying anything new. When you lack a conscious process for dialogue, one or another faction inevitably takes the helm, and your actions follow suit, rigid conformity one day, random rebellion the next, seldom the considered, value-driven course that leads to sustained fulfillment. We tend to believe that consistency emerges from sheer willpower or disciplined routines. But Jung dared to suggest that without internal alignment, willpower is a brittle commodity. It cracks under stress, feed, an endless cycle of resolve and collapse. True coherence springs from inner negotiation, a respectful exchange where each part feels heard, valued, and steers toward a shared aim. This is not navel-gazing namby-pamby talk. It's the art of forging a living treaty among the voices that make up your psyche, so that when you decide on a course, be it pursuing a passion project, setting boundaries in relationships, or caring for your health, you do so from a place of integrated strength rather than reactive compromise. So how does one build this psychic counsel? The simplest, most reliable method is journaling as if you're hosting a round table with yourself. Don't imagine you need fancy stationery or lofty introspection. All you require is a notebook or document and a willingness to give voice to each inner persona. Begin by setting a gentle intention, I'm here to listen. Then, in plain language, jot down a question that matters to you right now. Should I take that sabbatical, or how can I balance discipline with creativity? After the question, allocate space for each major voice within you. You might title them ego, critic, child, caretaker, and self. Under each heading, pen the first responses that emerge without censoring anything. Let ego speak its fears, let critic unleash its verdicts, let the child plead for fun, let the caretaker fuss over obligations, and let the self, if it can, offer calm perspective. At first, this exercise can feel awkward, like conducting a play with an audience of one. You may find yourself faking voices or struggling to differentiate between parts. That's perfectly normal. Over time, as you persist, you'll notice that the entries begin to develop distinct tones. Ego's prose might be clipped and pragmatic, the child's words tinged with whimsy, the critic's sentences bleak and sharp, the self's voice quiet, measured, and deeply reassuring. The very act of writing creates the psychological distance you need to observe and engage rather than be swept away. You transform from a rudderless passenger into the chairperson of your internal symposium. Consider how this practice played out for Marcus, a mid-level manager who felt perpetually torn between his ambition and his longing for family time. By keeping a daily dialogue journal, he saw how his ego clung to prestige, convinced that recognition defined his worth, while his inner child mourned the loss of Saturday morning cartoons with his son. The critic chided him for thinking he deserved either success or play, insisting on a life of responsible sacrifice. Meanwhile, his self, initially faint and hesitant, began to whisper a reconciliatory vision. What if you defined success by presence rather than accolades? That question became a hinge. From that point, Marcus restructured his work hours, delegated more, and instituted a ritual of technology-free Sundays with his family. Within weeks, he noticed a dramatic shift. Meetings felt less draining, projects moved forward with renewed creativity, and his son's laughter became the highlight of his week. The disparate parts of his psyche were no longer at war. They cooperated toward a shared valuation of work and life. Psychologically speaking, you are engaging the process of ego transcendence, the critical step Jung saw as central to individuation. By naming, addressing, and integrating internal voices, you free psychic energy previously squandered on self-sabotage or internal bickering. You create a feedback loop. Moments of inspiration no longer feel fleeting because they've been vetted by yourself, and your plans no longer feel stifling because they've been nurtured by the child's longing for joy. Your critic still has a seat, but it no longer wields unilateral veto power. Instead, it becomes a discerning editor, pointing out flaws but not crushing possibility. This form of inner diplomacy also dissolves that gnawing existential tension between playing it safe and going for it. The tug-of-war between obligations and desires gives way to a balanced consensus. You don't have to sacrifice your integrity for excitement or your responsibilities for inspiration. Both can coexist when each gets to articulate its perspective. Even when voices clash, say, the risk-averse ego balks at a new venture, the self can propose moderated experiments. Let's commit to this project for 2 hours a week for 1 month and reassess. That kind of compromise honors the concerns of each part without consigning your dreams to indefinite postponement. If journaling feels daunting, another approach is to internalize the counsel through silent reflection. Close your eyes, take several grounding breaths, and imagine a round table with chairs labeled for each part of you. Visualize inviting each figure in, even if they appear abstract. Perhaps your critic feels like a stern teacher, your child a curious sprite, your ego a suit-clad executive, yourself an open-hearted elder. Let them speak, silently or aloud, within your mind's ear. Practice interrupting the most dominant voice and asking another to speak. Notice how this mental rehearsal gradually strengthens your capacity to hear subtler insights during the day, without the need to stop and journal every time. A powerful narrative twist emerges when you realize that this inner counsel can transcend mere problem solving. It becomes the crucible for uncovering your life purpose. Instead of reflexively chasing goals, money, status, security, you begin to ask, which resonates with the wisdom of myself, honors the playfulness of my child, satisfies my drive for competence, and accounts for my obligations? The goals that survive this multi-perspectival vetting are those that integrate desire, practicality, joy, and responsibility. They carry an almost magnetic pull because they're not moralistic mandates or random impulses, they're the distilled consensus of your psyche's highest intentions. Now, before you worry that this sounds like a time-consuming ritual you'll never sustain, note how swiftly the practice scales into daily life. A quick morning journal entry can take 5 minutes. A breath-centered visualization can occur on your commute or before a meeting. Over time, your counsel becomes an ever-present resource. When a tough decision arises, instead of reacting from habit or stress, you tap into your inner table, balance perspectives, and choose with integrated clarity. Stress levels drop because you're no longer fighting yourself. Confidence rises because your choices align with your core. To deepen the process, begin tracking the themes that arise in your counsel over days and weeks. Perhaps you notice a recurring plea from your child for more adventure, or your critic repeatedly warns against risk in relationships, or yourself gently reminds you that creativity revives your soul. These patterns signal areas that demand attention. Perhaps you need to schedule a mini adventure, practice self-compassion, or carve out artistic time. The counsel then evolves into a living roadmap for your personal growth, guiding both micro-decisions and major life shifts. Let's pause for a moment and invite you to try this right now. Take a comfortable position, close your eyes, breathe deeply 3 times. Picture that round table. In your mind's eye, call forth the ego, the critic, the child, the caretaker, whatever parts you recognize as loudest in your psyche. Allow each to offer one sentence in response to the question, what does my life most need right now? You may hear curt, self-protective answers, or tender, hopeful suggestions. Jot them down without judgment. Then ask yourself to speak. Notice its tone, likely calm, compassionate, and far-seeing. Let its message resonate before you return your eyes to the room. As you open your eyes, you may feel an immediate sense of grounded clarity, or you might feel the gentle tremor of new insights beginning to stir. Both outcomes are signs you've initiated the alchemy of inner dialogue. The residual tension between competing parts will linger at first, but that's normal. You're learning to host a conversation that was formerly suppressed or invisible. With each repetition, your psyche grows more accustomed to this integrated mode of operating. Over time, intuitive alignment becomes your default state rather than a rare event. What's most remarkable is how this practice dovetails with other aspects of your transformation. Recall the earlier work with the mirror of unfulfilled potential. You uncovered buried dreams and named desires. Then you danced with your shadow, reclaiming energies once repressed. Now, through inner dialogue, you integrate those revelations into coherent action, no longer at the mercy of knee-jerk reactions or external pressures, but guided by a living consensus within. You become the conductor of your internal orchestra, ensuring that each instrument, desire, discipline, caution, creativity, compassion, plays in harmonious concert. This inner counsel doesn't promise to eliminate challenges or ambiguous feelings. Rather, it offers you a robust mechanism for navigating them with poise. When doubt arises, you consult the panel. When you're too anxious to act, you let the child and the self negotiate a pilot experiment. When responsibilities collide, you listen to the caretaker and the ego to find a sustainable compromise. What once felt like indecision or fear becomes the balanced deliberation of a mind united rather than fractured. And here's the part that sparks real transformation. As you master this dialogue, you begin to sense the contours of Jung's transformation secret he wove through myths and alchemical images. It's the realization that consciousness itself, this capacity to witness, question, and integrate, holds the key to co-authoring your psyche. This internal counsel, once activated, becomes the living embodiment of that secret. It's neither a trick nor a theory, it's an accessible practice that lives in the simple act of listening and writing, of imagining and feeling, of granting every facet of you a voice. Soon, you'll be ready to channel this integrated clarity into symbolic actions that resonate at the soul level, daily rites that transform the mundane into the sacred. But before we move into that domain of ritual and ceremony, pause and honor the small revolution you've already initiated. Feel the subtle shift in your inner climate. Recognize that your next step isn't another grand strategy but the everyday devotion to this inner counsel, showing up, interrogating impulses, and celebrating insights. In that commitment lies the power to reshape not only your choices, but the very architecture of your consciousness. As the morning sun filters through your window or the hum of the day gathers around you, carry this internal counsel with you. Notice how it colors your responses when an unexpected challenge arises. Observe the newfound spaciousness when you deliberate. Sense the buoyancy when you act from the place where ego, shadow, child, and self have agreed to walk in step. Allow that integrated momentum to infuse everything you do. And now, as the dialogue within finds its rhythm, prepare for the next horizon, the rite of passage into authenticity. In that stage, you'll learn to extend this inner coherence into outward rituals, symbolic acts that solidify your intentions and anchor your transformation in the world. These are not mere habits, but soul-stirring ceremonies that seal the unity you've forged beneath the surface. If the inner counsel is your map, then ritual will be your vehicle, carrying your integrated self into reality with purpose and meaning. Get ready to step through that gateway. Your next invitation awaits. Part 4. The rite of passage into authenticity. You've convened your inner counsel, given voice to shadow and self, and woven your disparate impulses into a coherent, living tapestry. Yet this newfound alignment, as powerful as it feels in quiet moments of reflection, still risks remaining an internal novelty unless it finds expression in the world. Habits, no matter how disciplined, can degenerate into mechanical routines. Goals, no matter how passionately chosen, can slip into boxes on a to-do list. What transforms intention into embodiment, what turns insight into lived truth, is ritual, symbolic acts that bypass the rational mind, speak directly to the heart, and rewire your psyche at its roots. Are you willing to make a symbolic sacrifice, to mark a threshold and declare, from this moment forward, I am different? That question is the hinge of authentic change, the portal through which the inner revolution steps into daily life. Imagine that each morning you wake not into a blur of autopilot motions but into a consecrated space. The first breath you draw carries the weight of purpose. The coffee you pour becomes a ceremony of intention. The brush of cold water on your face feels like baptism into a new identity. This is not about elaborate altars or time-consuming rites. It's about transforming ordinary gestures into invitations to presence. When you light a candle and whisper your aim, "May I cultivate courage today," you're planting a seed in your unconscious. That tiny flame becomes a beacon, reminding you of your commitment whenever flickering shadows threaten to pull you back into old patterns. The simplest ritual, repeated with devotion, can outlast the strongest burst of willpower. Ritual speaks a language older than words, a language our nervous systems remember even when our conscious minds rebel. Anthropologists tell us that every culture, from the most ancient to the most modern, anchors moments of transition with ceremony, coming of age, marriage, mourning. Yet in our busy lives we've often stripped away these sacred markers, leaving ourselves adrift between the demands of yesterday and the anxieties of tomorrow. We crave transformation, yet lack the container to hold it. Creating your own rite of passage is a radical act of reclamation. You design the framework that honors the gravity of inner change and insulates it from the distractions that so easily co-opt your energy. Here's a practical diagnosis. When intention remains intangible, it dissolves under pressure. You vow to speak your truth, but when confrontation arises, you shrink back. You decide to honor your creativity, but a looming deadline consumes every spare minute. Your inner coherence flickers because no external structure sustains it. Ritual remedies this by linking an action to an intention through symbolism. By naming your aim, choosing a prop, a stone, a journal, a drop of oil, and performing a sequence with mindful attention, you create a neural pathway that anchors feeling to practice. The more senses you engage, sight, sound, touch, even scent, the deeper the imprint on your psyche. Let's ground this in an example. Meet Alex, a software engineer who found himself trapped in the glow of screens from dawn to dusk. He yearned for stillness but couldn't pry himself away from notifications. So Alex devised a simple ritual. Each evening at 6, he places a single green leaf on his desk, closes his laptop, and pours a cup of herbal tea. As the steam rises, he sets a timer for 5 minutes and simply breathes, watching the leaf's veins catch the lamplight. No planning, no journaling, just presence. That leaf, ordinary by any measure, became sacrosanct. Colleagues teased him at first, but Alex didn't care. The ritual cracked open a space for reflection. Within weeks, he noticed creativity blossoming, ideas he'd long suffocated began to surface, and the allure of endless screen time lost its grip. You don't need a lofty goal or a grand gesture to begin. It could be as unassuming as choosing a colored ribbon to wrap around your wrist each morning, a constant tactile reminder of the boundary you're setting. Today, I honor my voice, or today, I choose curiosity over fear. Or perhaps you keep a small bowl of water by your door. Before stepping out, you pinch up a drop, let it swirl between your fingers, and whisper a concise affirmation, "I carry kindness," or "I welcome challenge." The cool touch, the soft sound, the simple words, these elements combine to signal to your whole system that something has shifted. You don't rush out as the same person who sat down, you carry a blessing into the world. There's an existential risk here, the ridiculousness of public exposure. You might worry that your partner will laugh at your leaf ritual, that coworkers will raise eyebrows at your ribbon, that friends will roll their eyes at your water bowl. Welcome to the rite of passage. Any threshold worth crossing requires risking judgment. The old self clings to the known, predictability, comfort, invisibility. It will resist your symbolic acts with a flurry of self-doubt. This is silly, it won't make a difference, people will think I've lost it. But each time you honor the ritual despite the discomfort, you accumulate integrity. You prove to yourself that your inner word holds weight, that your commitment is not a passing fancy. And slowly, the nervous system learns that these acts are not frivolous but lifelines. Consider Maya, a busy mom who longed to write but couldn't reclaim time amid PTA meetings and playdates. She crafted a tiny altar in her laundry room, a stack of 3 books she admired, a smooth pebble from a childhood trip, and a feather she found on a morning walk. Before loading each batch of clothes, she pressed her hand on the pebble, breathed deeply, and said, "Words flow through me." The laundry drum became her sanctuary. In the hum of the washer, she began to draft sentences in her mind. By the end of the month, she carried a draft of her first short story in the pocket of her yoga pants. Maya's ritual didn't require permission or space. It transmuted a chore into a portal for her creativity. For your own right, start by clarifying the threshold you wish to cross. Is it the boundary between doubt and confidence? Between passivity and action? Between fragmentation and presence? Name the crossing in an evocative way: threshold of courage, portal of presence, gate of my voice. Then choose a simple symbol to represent that threshold: a stone, a shell, a page torn from a magazine. Decide on one consistent gesture: lighting a candle, laying your symbol on a surface, touching your heart with your fingertips. Pair it with a sentence or two you say aloud or in your mind. Practice the sequence for at least a week at the same time or in the same context. Note the subtle shifts that follow: a spark of clarity before hard conversations, a moment of calm in chaos, a surge of creativity when ideas once felt blocked. The transformation arc here moves from mechanical routines: coffee as caffeine delivery, elevator ride as commute ritual, evening bath as dirt removal, to intentional ceremonies that stir the soul. You discover that even a 5-second act, repeated daily, can crack open new neural maps. You stop asking, "Why haven't I changed?" and begin proclaiming, "I am changing, right here, right now." That sense of immediate enactment builds momentum. Ritual begets ritual. One small rite blossoms into a constellation of practices that weave together mind, heart, and body. You become an artisan of your own psyche, designing ceremonies that honor your evolving needs and aspirations. But beware, ritual without reflection is hollow. The danger lies in sanctifying an action so thoroughly that you misinterpret devotion for growth. Lighting a candle without ever pausing to listen to your inner counsel is like building a shrine to a god you don't know. That's why rituals must remain tethered to conscious intention. Each time you perform your rite, take a breath afterward and ask, "What stirred in me? What resistance arose? What felt piercingly alive?" These follow-up questions deepen the ritual from mere performance into genuine transformation. They ensure you're not hiding behind symbolism but using it as a gateway. The psychological mechanism empowering ritual is ancient. By enacting a symbol, you bypass the rational defenses that habitually override your deeper impulses. You signal to your limbic system and your body that something meaningful is unfolding. Over time, the symbol and the action coalesce into a powerful trigger. The moment you touch your chosen stone, the mind shifts gears. That carryover is invaluable in moments of stress. Touch the stone, breathe, recall your vow, and you recalibrate within seconds. You no longer need to remember the long-form intention. The ritual becomes the shorthand for your highest commitment. Ritual also expands your sense of identity beyond the narrow confines of daily roles. When you stand barefoot on the floor, crush a leaf under your foot, or gaze into a bowl of water, you link to a narrative older than your personal story. You tap into rhythms of nature, myth, and the collective unconscious. Jung believed that these shared symbols resonate with archetypal forces within us, elements of wisdom and vitality that lie dormant until awakened by ceremonial acts. You're not merely an office worker, a parent, or a student. You are an evolving being participating in the dance of life, marking your steps with intention and grace. What if you gathered a group, friends, family, fellow seekers, and co-created a simple rite of passage? Together you might share stones or ribbons, speak vows of encouragement, ring a bell to signal a new beginning. The collective energy magnifies the personal commitment. You become part of a small tribe, carrying each other's transformations. This step nudges you closer to Jung's next frontier, bridging individual awakening with a larger human story. For now, though, you may choose solitude or company. Either way, treat your ritual as an experiment, record your observations, adjust the symbolism if it feels stale, deepen the gestures that resonate most. As you integrate ritual into your life, notice how your relationship to time changes. Minutes once dissolved in distraction become charged with possibility. Transitions, waking, ending work, returning home, become gateways rather than gaps. You learn to honor the threshold moments that previously slipped by unnoticed. Life feels less like a linear series of tasks and more like a tapestry woven with intention. You cultivate an inner rhythm that guides you even when external demands roar. That rhythm isn't rigid, it's responsive, adaptable, enlivening. Now, before you rush off to invent 10 different rites, pause and choose just one. Make it delightfully simple. It might be as brief as a single breath accompanied by the phrase, "I step into my power," or as tactile as tracing a pattern on your palm before important conversations. Commit to it for at least 7 nights or 7 days. Notice what doors creak open. Notice what resistance snarls. Invite whatever arises into your ongoing inner dialogue. Ask your ego, your child, your critic, and yourself how the rite feels. Listen to their feedback and refine the ritual accordingly. In inventing a personal rite of passage, you are both priest and initiate, choreographing a sacred dance that only you can perform. Each enactment loosens the grip of old stories and cements the new story you're choosing to inhabit. You are not performing magic. You are engaging the psyche's built-in capacity to recognize symbols as carriers of meaning. Through ritual, you become conscious creator of the emotional currents that shape your life. And as the days unfold, you'll sense something remarkable. The boundary between ritual and reality begins to blur. The integrity you practice in small ceremonies radiates into your conversations, decisions, and relationships. You carry a trace of the sacred into mundane moments. You meet challenges not as disruptions but as stages for your continued ceremony of becoming. The rite of passage is no longer a discrete event but a living thread woven through every day. What remains to be discovered, however, is how this personal alchemy extends beyond your own psyche into the shared world, the bridge to collective meaning that awaits ahead. You'll learn how individual rites ripple outward, igniting transformation in those around you, and how the synergy of personal and communal ceremony can reshape entire communities. But first, pause and lean fully into your new ritual. Honor the small threshold you've chosen, tend to it with devotion, and witness how the spark you kindle today becomes a flame consuming the old patterns of inauthenticity. If you're ready to seal your commitment, pause now. Choose your symbol, craft your vow, and step through your self-designed gateway. Feel the weight of your intentions settle into your bones. And stay tuned, because next we'll explore how this solitary rite of passage unfolds into a shared journey, building a bridge from your personal authenticity to a collective purpose that reverberates far beyond the confines of your private ritual. Part 5. The bridge to collective meaning. There comes a moment in every personal awakening when the walls of solitude tremble, as if echoing with the whispered question, "What good is freedom if it lives only in the echo chamber of my own heart?" You may have felt it when tending your private ritual, how the flame of intention flickers not only within but also casts light outward, revealing shadows in the faces of those around you. The realization strikes like a chord: your individuation, your bold dance with selfhood, is incomplete until it meets the other, family, community, the wider tapestry of humankind. Genuine liberation, paradoxically, unfolds when you commit your hard-won authenticity to something larger than yourself, offering your transformation as a gift to the world. Consider the paradox of a stone thrown into still water. The ripples emanate far beyond the point of impact, stirring eddies where you cannot see. Your journey through mirror, shadow, dialogue, and ritual has been that first toss, the momentum of inner change breaking the surface of your being. But the real alchemy occurs when those ripples intersect with the waters of other lives. How does your reclaimed voice echo in a sibling's courage to speak their truth? How does your integrated strength inspire a friend to reweave torn strands of their identity? The bridge to collective meaning is built one interaction at a time, as your authenticity meets the world and awakens latent possibilities in others. Psychologically, we are wired not only for self-preservation but also for belonging. Evolutionary anthropologists point out that early humans survived by forming tribes, pooling resources, and aligning purpose. Isolation may foster introspection, but true flourishing blooms at the crossroads of individual gifts and communal needs. When you channel your inner counsel's consensus outward, whether in a heartfelt conversation, a creative offering, or an act of service, you ignite a reciprocal energy. Your authenticity becomes an unspoken permission slip for others to reveal their own fractures and to begin their own journeys toward wholeness. Look around your circle, perhaps a coworker who plays the mask of confidence while burning out beneath. Maybe a friend whose laughter has grown brittle, a partner whose dreams were parked in the lot of someday. Each of them carries a silent ache, a shadow of expectation they cannot name. When you share your story of peeling away masks and convening inner voices, you extend a lifeline. Vulnerability, when offered with integrity, is contagion in the best sense. It spreads courage. It tells the world that imperfection is not a liability but the raw material of connection. In that moment, your personal breakthrough becomes collective ignition. Social psychologists describe this process as emotional contagion. We mirror the affective states of those we trust. When you stand in your authenticity, you radiate possibility, increasing the temperature of bravery around you. It's why movements often begin with a single individual who risks saying, "I see injustice," or "I choose joy," or "I claim my right to be seen." The collective mind, starved for truth, leans in. You become a catalyst, not by grandiose pronouncement, but by the simple act of embodying coherence. Think of Gandhi's quiet resolve at the Salt March, Martin Luther King Jr.'s heartfelt "I have a dream," or a teacher's spontaneous confession of her own learning struggles. They all began with an individual standing in authenticity and beckoning the world to step forward. Yet the leap from personal ceremony to shared purpose holds its own existential dilemma. Will you risk vulnerability in the messy arena of human relationship, where outcomes are unpredictable and hearts may recoil? There's no guarantee that your outreach will be met with applause. You might encounter resistance, dismissal, skepticism, even hostility. But recall the ritual you've practiced. It taught you to honor resistance as a form of life, not a threat. The same ember of intention that guides your solitude can guide your engagement. When you anchor your courage in your internal counsel, ego, shadow, child, and self-aligned, you carry a ballast that steadies you against the crashing waves of doubt. Practical example, imagine you orchestrate a simple gathering, inviting neighbors for a shared meal without an agenda. You declare, "Tonight, we practice presence." You light a single candle in the center of the table, a token of collective witness, and offer a prompt, "Share one moment this week when you felt unseen." Awkwardness will hover like a tentative guest. Voices may tremble. Yet as one by one people speak their truth, frustrations, hopes, disappointments, a web of empathy forms. Strangers' names become familiar, burdens lighten through communal bearing, and the invisible fences between us and them begin to crumble. That candle, like your personal talisman, becomes a beacon of belonging. Behind this lies a deeper mechanism, collective individuation. Jung envisioned not only personal self-realization but also a societal evolution toward greater consciousness. Each time an individual integrates shadow and self, a tiny fragment of the human psyche awakens. When shared, these awakenings weave together into a larger tapestry of cultural transformation. It's as if the world harbors an unconscious impetus toward wholeness, waiting for individuals like you to catalyze the process. Your rite of passage no longer marks only your threshold, it becomes an opening in the collective barrier, inviting a wave of shared reflection and rebirth. You might wonder, where do I begin? The answer lies in aligning your unique gifts with a cause that resonates with your core values. Perhaps you're a writer moved to amplify silenced voices. Perhaps you're an environmental enthusiast who can translate data into compelling, heart-stirring stories. Perhaps you're someone who simply has a knack for listening, offering hospitality, or lighting literal and figurative candles in darkened rooms. Whatever your passion, when you infuse it with the authenticity you've cultivated, you become the living embodiment of a bridge, uniting inner truth without a need. Take the story of Raphael, a graphic designer who felt trapped in the routine of corporate branding. After months of shadow work and ritual practice, he realized his deepest longing was to empower immigrant artisans in his city. He repurposed his skills to design logos and packaging for community cooperatives, then hosted a quarterly showcase at a local cafe. What began as a solitary vow, "I will use my creativity for liberation," grew into a vibrant network of mutual support. Artisans felt seen and celebrated. Customers discovered stories they never knew existed. Raphael's own sense of purpose expanded beyond his individual practice into a living, breathing community tapestry. Notice how his ritual of design became a conduit for collective meaning. Notice how his courage to step beyond self-preservation rippled outward. The shift from self-contained striving to compassionate action emerges not from exhaustion or guilt, but from a deep resonance between your inner counsel's intention and a cause that aches for your unique contribution. You cease being a passive beneficiary of society's offerings and become an active co-creator of its narrative. There's also a magnetic feedback loop. As you sow seeds of authenticity in others, you harvest vitality in yourself. Moments of shared vulnerability strengthen your resolve. Witnessing someone else's breakthrough fortifies your own faith and transformation. The isolation you once felt in your personal journey dissolves into a shared pilgrimage. You realize that community is not a distraction from individuation, but its very expression at a collective scale. Of course, collective meaning can take many forms. You might join an existing cause, amplifying voices already striving for change. You might convene a new circle, inviting diverse perspectives and co-authoring fresh narratives. You might simply infuse your daily work, parenting, teaching, healthcare, technology, with a mindset of sacred service, turning even routine interactions into opportunities for depth. It's not the scale of the project that matters, but the authenticity you bring. A teacher who, each morning, centers her lesson in a reflection on empathy can transform tens of children's relationship with learning. A cashier who greets customers with genuine curiosity can brighten countless days. The bridge to collective meaning is as wide or as narrow as your courage to stand, to speak, and to listen. Yet the path is not without obstacles. Cynicism lurks at crowded corners, whispering that change is too slow, that one person is powerless. Burnout threatens when you give without replenishing your own well. Boundaries blur between self-sacrifice and self-neglect. Here again, your inner counsel proves indispensable. Let the ego protect you against overextension, let the child remind you of play, let the critic offer discerning limits, and let the self guide you towards sustainable rhythm. Your bridge to collective meaning is not a one-way highway but a two-lane road requiring care, replenishment, and occasional rest stops. There's an existential edge here. By offering your transformation as service, you align with a narrative older than any individual life, the archetype of the healer, the teacher, the companion. You choose not to hoard light but to pass it along, recognizing that the cosmos thrives not on isolated brilliance but on the interplay of countless sparks. This attitude counteracts the cultural myth that success is zero-sum. Instead, it elevates the principle that human flourishing unfolds most richly in networks of generosity. And now, as your ripples extend outward, you stand on the brink of Jung's final teaching, the unification of the personal and the universal in a single, everyday act. He hinted that the ultimate secret of transformation is not hidden in esoteric symbols or abstract theories, but in the capacity to enact conscious self-creation in service of humanity. He called us to become conscious agents in the unfolding story of the collective psyche. What will your next step be? How will you translate your personal rite into a shared ritual that invites others across the threshold? Pause here. Feel the echo of your own transformation vibrating against the wider world. Remember the faces you've passed on the street, the voices that long for acknowledgement, the communities hungry for authenticity. Ask yourself, what is the smallest act of collective bridge building I can commit to today? Perhaps it's a phone call to someone you admire, offering your story. Perhaps it's volunteering an hour of your time. Perhaps it's writing an open letter, organizing a virtual circle, or simply sharing a moment of genuine presence with someone who needs it. In answering, you prepare to cross from personal awakening into communal resonance, carrying forward the living flame of your inner work. And as you do, the stage is set for the revelation that lies ahead, the deceptively simple secret of conscious self-creation that, when practiced daily, knits together mirror, shadow, dialogue, ritual, and service into the vibrant tapestry of a life fully lived. Your journey toward collective meaning is the penultimate act before you claim the authorship of your destiny in the grand story of humanity. The next chapter beckons. Will you step across the threshold? Now, at the very summit of our shared journey, the contours of your psyche tremble with anticipation. You have held up the mirror, invited the shadow, convened the inner council, enacted your rite, and cast a bridge into communal waters. And yet something still stirs beneath the surface, a primordial whisper suggesting that all these stages converge into a single, living principle, an invitation to become the conscious creator of your own destiny rather than a passive passenger of circumstance. Think back to the tales of ancient alchemists who disguised their most potent secret in cryptic symbolic language: the union of sun and moon, the marriage of sulfur and mercury, the birth of the philosopher's stone. They were encoding a simple truth: our psyche contains archetypal agents that, when consciously aligned, transmute the lead of our unexamined habits into the gold of authentic being. What if Jung's sprawling treatises, his labyrinthine myths and cosmic metaphors, all whispered the same guiding phrase? What if the entire alchemy of individuation depended on one deceptively tiny act, chosen and enlivened moment by moment, like a candle struck against flint? This hidden principle is what we now unveil: conscious self-creation. It is the decision to treat every instant as a blank page and to understand that each thought, each breath, each gesture writes the story of your life. You are not merely shaped by genes, upbringing, or fate. You are continually co-authoring your experience through the stance you take toward yourself and the world. This is no airy abstraction. It is practical and immediate. It is the small pivot from autopilot to mindful choice. It is the realization that habit may be the sculptor of character, but intention can be its grand architect. Imagine a morning when you wake with inertia already whispering, "Not today." The old self-sabotage pattern would press you into scrolling through messages, slipping into reactivity before you even stand. But now, armed with the secret of conscious creation, you pause. You become the observer of your own impulse. You notice the familiar tug of distraction and instead gently realign your focus. I choose to breathe. I choose to stand. I choose to inhabit this moment with purpose. In that very pause, you have reclaimed the pen of authorship. You may recall how the mirror revealed your buried desires, how the shadow offered hidden energy, how the counsel formed coherence, how the right anchored intention, and how the communal bridge extended impact. Each stage prepared you for this final articulation, this culmination in a habit so simple it almost escapes notice. Yet in its simplicity lies its transformative power. Conscious self-creation asks nothing more than a brief moment of awareness before action. It does not require elaborate journals or candlelit altars. It requires the courage to recognize an inner delineation, choice or habit, freedom or drift. Scientific research echoes this. Neuroscientists call this moment of choice cognitive decoupling, the ability to pause between stimulus and response. Just a fraction of a second's gap allows the prefrontal cortex to rewrite the script. That micropause, practiced again and again, reshapes neural pathways, building strength in the regions that govern reflection and self-regulation. This is the science behind conscious self-creation. You literally train your brain to favor presence and intention over reactive patterns. Over time, the gap lengthens. Over time, the quality of your life shifts in irreversible ways. Let's ground this in a real example. Consider Maya, a nonprofit director whose life had become a series of emergency meetings and late nights. She was brilliant at problem solving but exhausted by the constant pressure. One day, she learned about conscious self-creation and decided to test it. At the moment her email notification chimed, a habitual source of stress, she implemented a simple rule: 3 deep breaths before opening her inbox. That 3-breath ritual cost her nothing in time but gave her a priceless pause, clarity, reorientation. Within weeks, her responses became calmer, more creative, less driven by urgency. She transformed her professional persona not by changing her schedule but by inserting that micropause of presence. It did not stop there. The same pause that served Maya at her desk became her lifeline in personal crises, a heated argument with a loved one, a moment of self-doubt before a presentation, the surge of anxiety before a health appointment. Each time, she paused, felt her heartbeat, grounded in her intention, and consciously chose her next words or actions. She discovered that the space between stimulus and response was the birthplace of her freedom. She reclaimed agency, one breath at a time. That is the essence of conscious self-creation. Notice how this secret aligns with everything you have learned so far. The mirror taught you to notice unfulfilled longings. The shadow taught you to embrace disowned energies. The council taught you to listen to inner voices. The right taught you to anchor intention and symbolism. The collective bridge taught you to extend your authenticity into the world. Now, conscious self-creation weaves all these threads into an ongoing practice. It is the daily decision that activates and sustains the transformation initiated in the earlier stages. Yet an existential dilemma remains. Will you concede this power to your programming, letting autopilot script your days, or will you dare to inhabit each moment as an act of creation? This choice is not a one-time proclamation. It is a perpetual recommitment. It calls for relentless curiosity. Which impulse am I following now? Which voice speaks most strongly? Am I choosing from my inner counsel or succumbing to default habit? Each moment offers a threshold. Each choice either cedes authority or reclaims it. The price of indifference is an unconscious life. The reward of engagement is the unfolding of your unique potential. The narrative twist here is that the secret is not hidden in complexity but in its simplicity. Jung's myths and alchemical riddles pointed toward the same hinge, consciousness. The real philosopher's stone is not a substance but the awakened mind that knows itself as author. You do not need to traverse distant castles of arcane scholarship to find this key. You carry it in your own capacity to pause, to choose, to respond with intention. This is the transformation secret, accessible to anyone willing to stop, breathe, and be present. That said, simple does not mean easy. Your habitual patterns are deeply etched by years of repetition. The default mind will resist, offering distractions, rationalizations, even shame. I don't have time, I'm not good at this, it won't make a difference. Recognize these as echoes of your shadow and critic, attempting to maintain the status quo. Invite them into your inner council and ask, what is this resistance protecting me from? Often you'll find it shields you from the discomfort of uncertainty. But remember, discomfort is the threshold of growth. It is the crucible in which conscious self-creation tempers your resolve. To turn this secret into a lived habit, select one moment each day to practice the pause and choose ritual. It might be the instant your alarm rings, the moment your phone buzzes, the second before you sip your coffee, the beat before you speak. Anchor it with a simple cue, a visual reminder on your phone, a word written where you'll see it, a bead on a bracelet. Each cue triggers the pause. Breathe 2 or 3 times, feel your feet on the ground, recall your highest intention, then proceed. Track just that one moment for a week. Notice the difference in your emotional tone, your clarity, your alignment with purpose. Over time, you will discover that the pause spontaneously emerges in other contexts. You will catch yourself mid-reaction and choose differently. You will feel a subtle shift in how you inhabit your body, and how you hold your presence, and the steadiness of your attention. You will begin to feel less like a leaf tossed by the wind and more like the captain of your own ship, navigating by inner compass. Those small decisions accumulate into a life built by choice rather than by default. Consider the story of Javier, who chronicled his journey in a simple app. Every time he managed to pause before responding to an email, he tapped a green button. Every time he failed, a red one. Within 2 weeks, the green tally outpaced the red. He felt proud of his growing capacity to choose. More importantly, he noticed that his relationships at work improved. Colleagues responded more warmly when he replied thoughtfully rather than impulsively. He was no longer the reactive colleague but the considered collaborator. The app was merely a tool. The real shift was his recognition that he possessed the creative power of choice. This practice extends beyond communication. It underpins every domain of life. Before you choose what to eat, pause and align with your body's most honoring nourishment. Before you decide how to spend free time, pause and ask whether it serves your true rest or simply distracts you. Before you respond to a loved one's request, pause and consider your boundary and the generosity you wish to embody. Each choice, once made consciously, becomes a brushstroke in the portrait of your authentic life. And here lies the final transformation arc, from believing you are shaped by outer forces to understanding that you are the living expression of continuous creation. You cease to wait for someone else to change your circumstances, you begin to change yourself moment by moment, and circumstances follow suit. You stop imagining a future self you hope to become, you inhabit that self right now by choosing its qualities in each instant. You become the alchemist of your own experience, transmuting the lead of past conditioning into the gold of present possibility. At this threshold, pause now and reflect. What is the single moment you will dedicate to this practice? Choose it, name it, anchor it with a cue. It could be as simple as the light of your phone unlocking screen, the first breath of your day, or the silent click of your computer powering up. Commit to pausing, breathing, orienting to intention, and then proceeding. Write that commitment down or speak it aloud. Then breathe again, feeling the weight of responsibility settling into your bones. This is your power, this is your choice. And as you take that breath, sense the subtle yet profound shift taking place. You are no longer waiting for transformation to arrive, you are the catalyst. You hold in your hands the key Jung concealed in myth and alchemy, consciousness as co-creation. This single act, repeated across the endless mosaic of moments, will unlock a life of deep authenticity and purpose. It is the moment-by-moment manifesto of your evolving self. So pause, decide, and step into the power of conscious self-creation. The next page awaits your pen. Now you stand at the edge of everything you thought you knew about yourself, peering back at the mirror that once reflected dutiful compliance and forward at the uncharted terrain of a life authored by your own conscious choices. You have traced the contours of your story. First, you held that unflinching mirror to unearth the spark of your unfulfilled potential. Next, you welcomed the shadow you had long denied, discovering that every disowned impulse carries the energy for profound creation. Then you convened that inner council, ego and child, critic and self, transforming internal clash into coherent vision. You devised a rite of passage, planting a symbol that consecrated your intentions in the soil of the everyday. You built a bridge to the collective, offering your authenticity as a gift that ripples beyond the narrow channel of personal transformation, and at last you unlocked the hidden alchemy of conscious self-creation, learning to pause, breathe, and choose your next word, your next step, your next thought. Each stage whispered the same urgent truth: you are not a passive spectator trapped in habits laid down before you were born. You are a living author, pen in hand, breathing life into the untold chapters of your own becoming. Think for a moment about where this journey began, a flicker of restlessness as dawn cracked open its pale light, a question rising in your chest: is this really my life, or a script I inherited? That single question was the key that unlocked your mirror. When you finally summoned the courage to ask yourself, What do I really want? You planted the seeds of rebellion against the comfortable illusions you'd been nursing. You discovered that behind every satisfied sigh of "I'm fine" lurked the quiet ache of a dream abandoned. Now, having retrieved that dream from the attic of memory, you know it is neither frivolous nor impractical. It is the very blueprint of your deepest aliveness. Then came the dance with your shadow, an embrace that felt formless and disquieting at first. You learned that those aspects of yourself you'd branded unacceptable were merely raw elements of energy waiting to be harnessed. When you whispered to your anger, your envy, your pride, and listened, without shame or judgment, they answered with an unexpected tenderness. You witnessed envy's longing mutate into inspiration and shame's sting soften into compassion. In that darkened ballroom of the psyche, you found that integration is not about banishing your darker impulses but about weaving them into the tapestry of your wholeness. You emerged not weaker but more alive, more vivid, more human. Guided by that new vitality, you convened an inner council, your own private roundtable where ego weighed practical concerns, the child pleaded for joy, the critic offered discerning edits, and the self sat as benevolent chair. Through simple journaling or silent visualization, you mediated between clashing voices and learned the art of true coherence. Decisions ceased to feel like battles and became instead harmonious collaborations, work projects infused with playfulness, relationships anchored in honest boundaries, goals born not of shoulds but of genuine yearning. You found that consistency no longer demanded Herculean willpower but flowed naturally from your newfound alignment. To honor that alignment in the world, you devised a personal rite, a symbolic ceremony that marked each morning or each threshold as sacred ground. Whether it was a single breath taken with intention, a stone held as a talisman, a ribbon tied around your wrist, or a whispered affirmation by candlelight, that ritual became a living contract between your inner vision and the outer world. You watched in awe as the simple act of consecrating a leaf or feather transformed cluttered routines into portals of presence. With each repetition, your nervous system remembered your intention and guided you back when distractions tempted you to slip. Realizing that true freedom ripples outward, you built a bridge to collective meaning. You offered your story of integration as an open invitation for others to reclaim their own voices. In small gatherings or through everyday gestures, listening deeply to a friend, sharing your breakthroughs, designing a community art project, you discovered that when one life awakens, dozens more stir from their slumber. You saw how authenticity is contagious, and how vulnerability, wielded with integrity, opens hearts. You experienced the humbling truth that your individuation finds its fullest expression when it participates in the story of humanity. And finally, you arrived at the deceptively simple secret of conscious self-creation, the micro-moment of choice between impulse and intention, the pause that breathes open possibility. You practiced stopping, to feel your feet on the ground, to sense your heartbeat, to ask, "What will I choose now?" Before you reached for your phone, before you clicked send, before you uttered a word. In that brief stillness you reclaimed your authorship, rewrote the neural pathways of habit, and turned every ordinary instant into a conscious act of becoming. That moment of cognitive decoupling is the philosopher's stone of the soul, subtle, unglamorous, yet infinitely potent. Now, as this chapter draws to a close, you stand at a critical crossroads. Behind you lies the path of comfortable compliance, the fading stage lights of other people's scripts. Ahead of you blazes uncharted territory, the landscape of your own unmediated presence, textured with the rough-hewn beauty of choices made in full awareness. You cannot return to the safe predictability of yesterday. The mirror has been cracked, the shadow has been invited, the council assembled, the rite enacted, the bridge cast, the sacred pause learned. There is no uninstalling this awakening, nor would you want to. Yet the adventure is only beginning. That hidden key you've now discovered, conscious self-creation, asks a singular question at every turn. Will you continue to drift in the current of habit, or will you choose your next thought, your next breath, your next movement with the deliberate power of a creator shaping clay? Will you live as though life is simply happening to you, or will you inhabit each moment as an opportunity to affirm who you are becoming? The greatest insight you can embody right now is this: every sunrise, every heartbeat, every choice can be the hatch through which your soul leaps into a fuller existence. So here is your final invitation. Take a deep breath and let your mind settle into that pause between stimulus and response. Ask yourself, which one insight from this journey am I willing to embody immediately? Perhaps it will be the courage to face your mirror unflinchingly. Perhaps it will be the willingness to welcome your shadow's gifts. Perhaps it will be the commitment to host an honest dialogue among your inner voices. Maybe it will be the creation of a simple daily rite, or the offering of your authenticity to someone else's journey. Or perhaps it will be the practice of that sacred pause, just one small moment of conscious choice in every hour. Whatever it is, let it be the seed you plant in the soil of today. Then, without delay, write a vow. It need not be long. It can be a single sentence: I vow to pause and breathe before I speak each morning, or I vow to greet my mirror with kindness, or I vow to share my story of growth with one friend this week. Choose a symbol, perhaps a stone, a ribbon, a drop of water, to anchor that vow. Repeat the vow as you hold the symbol, breathe, and feel it settle into your bones. You are not asking for permission or promising perfection. You are simply staking a claim on your own unfolding, right here, right now. And then, rise to meet the day. Notice the sun's first rays painting the skyline. Feel the weight of your body in this moment. Sense the electric potential simmering in the spaces between your thoughts. You do not have to wait for a sign, a guru, or an elaborate plan. The only requirement is that you choose to step off autopilot and claim your place as co-author of your own life. When will you stop wasting another sunrise on borrowed scripts and timid routines? When will you lean into the tension of growth and say, this is the day I begin, again, to live the story only I can create? The dawn is breaking. The pen is in your hand. What will your next word be?